Welcome everyone to the September You Already Own It office hours. I'm Ken Nubler, your host and one of the senior cloud strategists here at Planet Technologies. And today we'll be talking about solving modern desktop dilemmas with Microsoft 365. In addition to our guest speaker joining me today, we have the whole cloud strategist team below, as well as our You Already Own It program team, who consist of Casey Clayton, who's our program lead, Michelle McGraw, who is our benefits coordinator that works with us on scheduling briefings, workshops, sending out our monthly newsletter, and making sure questions that are submitted to the program are turned around within 24 hours. And lastly, our You Already Own It sponsor is Steve Winter, who is our Executive Vice President of Business Development and Delivery. If you have a question today, please put them in the chat, raise your hand, or you can always email us at youalreadyownit@go-planet.com. Also, show some reactions with the emoticons if you hear something you like, or contact your account team directly. Lastly, we record all these sessions, so feel free to share it with your colleagues. With that said, just a quick warning that we are now going to start the recording. Welcome. Today we'll be talking about solving modern desktop dilemmas with Microsoft 365. No matter where you are on your desktop deployment strategy, I'm sure you will get some great information out of today's session. For more information about today's program, make sure to check out our blog on this topic that was posted this week. We also have included some helpful links at the end of this program as well. So let's get started. With me today is Alec Presti. Alec is an architect for our Endpoint Technologies team here at Planet, and I've had the pleasure to work with him on many projects like Intune endpoint rollouts, autopilot, co-management, and AVD. Alec has pretty much worked with just about every MDM solution there is, so get your questions ready because we're ready to answer them. Please make Alec feel welcome, as this is his first time on the program. Thanks for joining us today, Alec. We're so glad you're with us. As always, before we get started, we would love to do some anonymous quick polls to see what types of customers we have with us today. We'll review the results at the end, so when you can, please submit your answers to the polls. So let's get started with what type of organization you work for. We're just trying to figure out who's with us today. Next, if you've started implementing modern endpoint deployment, what have you deployed? We're kind of interested in hearing what you've done. Intune, autopilot, co-management, AVD, Windows 365. We'd love to hear about your experiences. Certainly bring them up at the question and answer time at the end of this program. But please take this poll as of right now so we can kind of see where everybody is at. So let's quickly go over the agenda. In today's presentation, we'll start with an overview of modern endpoint deployment technologies, then talk about the current names of the endpoint products, since you know Microsoft loves to change names every so often. Then we'll get into each product by going over what it is and why you would use it. Then we will get into a demo of Intune and Autopilot. And finally wrap up with desktop as a service offerings of AVD and Windows 365. And of course, we'll save some time at the end for questions. We really want to hear about your experiences with these products and share what you have learned as well. I'm especially interested in hearing about your experiences with Windows 365 if anyone's using it. So let's go ahead and get started. So let me hand this off to Alec right now to get started with an overview of the modern endpoint deployment solutions. Alec?
Absolutely. Thank you, Ken. So ultimately, the way that this is, it is the next step of management from the on-prem Active Directory, group policy, physical workstations, as well as virtualization. So we have Intune device management. This is your command center. So this is everything that you want to set up, your group policies, your security policies, everything top to bottom, as well as application deployment. We also have co-management. Very simply, this is your on-prem management, physical devices on your network. We have autopilot, which is your catch-all net. So this is going to be essentially your, as soon as you purchase a device, it knows it's included in your infrastructure, immediately gets it set up, and you're good to go. We also have AVD, which is Azure Virtual Desktop. This is just compute resources. This can be workstations that are personalized to individual users or pooled hosts, the next generation of terminal server. We also have Windows 365, which are those essentially very similar to AVD. They are personalized workstations up and running and good to go in a few seconds. Alrighty, so When it comes to name changes, this gets very fun. So you may have heard of some of these solutions before. For instance, when it comes to Microsoft Intune, which is as effective of October 12th, 2022, Microsoft Intune is the new official name for the cloud management product. It was originally Windows Intune. It then went to Microsoft Endpoint Manager, or MEM, and now it's back to Microsoft Intune. So full circle, right around back to the beginning, up and running and good to go. And then we also have the on-prem management, which, as we can see here, is Microsoft Configuration Manager. This is going to be your on-prem, can be integrated with the cloud, but it is your on-prem management of workstations and Windows updates, that kind of setup. That went from Systems Management Server, System Center Configuration Manager, or SCCM, as most would know it. We also had Microsoft Endpoint Configuration Manager, MECM, and now we're back to Microsoft Configuration Manager. So you may have heard of it before. It is back, and there has been some updates to it as well. We also have some additional features here at the bottom for the Intune product family. Basically just calling out that Microsoft Intune is your cloud solution, Microsoft Configuration Manager would be your on-premise solution, and then some additional features below here for the Intune solutions, such as remote help, mobile application management, as well as endpoint privilege management.
All right, so let's go a little bit deeper now, and let's talk a little bit about Intune, Alec.
Absolutely. So to start with, we have cloud management of Windows. So this is your full enterprise management. This is your modern management of workstations. So essentially, this is the next step to on-prem Active Directory. It can be integrated, however, it can also be a standalone cloud management solution. Everything that you have in group policy, everything that you have in application deployment, whether that be MSIs through group policy or a third-party tool, can be implemented through Microsoft Endpoint, or Intune rather. We also have mobile device management. This is for your actual cellular devices and or tablets, Android, iOS, fully managed right through the system via Apple Business Manager and or Samsung Knox, Google Silent Enrollment as well. We also have MAM, which is for full BYOD. This is specifically for just managing your applications on non-enrolled devices. So if somebody installs an app, logs in as the user, you can have some policies pushed down as well that protects your information from getting out to the public.
Excellent. And, MAM's really great for BYOD type of scenarios where you're just controlling the apps on the device that are attached to those Microsoft credentials, right?
That is correct, yes. So it's any app that is a Microsoft solution can be managed via a MAM policy. And from there, you just set up those specifics and you're up and running and good to go.
And then correct me if I'm wrong, but that does not require Authenticator at all, right? So that's a nice lightweight way to do BYOD.
Exactly. So everything is fully built in and integrated with the mobile apps. So MAM can be set up directly with the Outlook app, the Teams app, and so forth.
Excellent, excellent, cool. All right, let's move on to co-management. Talk to us a little bit about that, Alec.
Absolutely. So co-management is a very interesting solution. So if you're using Microsoft Configuration Manager, aka SCCM, and you have that in play, you're happy with your policies, you're happy with your imaging, all that type of setup that you have currently, you can actually integrate directly into Microsoft Intune and pilot the scenario. So everything that you have there stays in play, your group policies stay in play, but then you can start to balance those workloads from one side to the other. So ultimately, you can move over your compliance policies, your device configuration policies, endpoint configuration policies for security, as well as Windows update policies and some of the Office click to run stuff as well. So it's a baby step into the new infrastructure.
Yeah, it's a way of just like piloting Intune without going all in 100% Intune, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, yeah. Cool. All right. Well, let's move on to autopilot real quick. And I think this is one where we've seen a lot of customers start getting some serious interest in this because it's saving them a lot of time, right?
Exactly. So this is a very simple tool set that's in play, but ultimately has a huge impact. It essentially takes any device that you have or are purchasing going forward and has them immediately integrated into your system. So for instance, once this is in play, it knows these devices are yours. It knows whether they're pre-existing. It knows if they are brand new net new devices from your vendor. Once you make that purchase or you enable autopilot, it knows regardless, even if they're off network, once they're powered up, it goes through the out-of-box experience, sets up the device for you, and immediately deploys everything based on Intune. So if you have applications, all of your templates that would normally be in your image for something like SCCM would get layered on during the autopilot process. So we have all that in play with the templated device rollout strategy. This ultimately just reduces the IT utilization. It becomes zero touch at this point.
And the important thing to point out here, right, Alec, is the fact that, you know, in the past, this required people to log in via VPN, possibly to get configured. And as long as you have access to the internet now, this is a great way to get those devices up to speed, right?
Exactly. So if you're fully cloud only, all they have to do is sign in. If you are going to be doing co-management or some sort of hybrid joining with an on-prem infrastructure, it can do that as well. So what it does is it integrates VPN access right into the autopilot out-of-box experience, and it will connect automatically without the user having to touch anything, pre-configures the device, does everything you need it to do, gets applications deployed, and then once it's up and running, they're live.
And the nice thing about this that I like is it takes the human error out of the equation for standardization and standard templates, right? So like, you know, people are, you know, you got the people in the back office configuring laptops and then shipping them out. That's no longer needed with this autopilot anymore, right? As long as you have a credential and you log in, you can get your device from Best Buy, immediately log in with your Azure AD credentials, boom. It changes it from pro to enterprise. It changes all those configuration settings for your enterprise right off the bat. It's just an incredible time saver. And so folks are seeing a lot of savings in time for deploying boxes out the door because there's no middleman anymore, right? It's already pre-configured and tested out.
100%. So yeah, top to bottom, IT can kind of take a step back. They can focus on more important things while users can just get a device directly shipped to them, have it show up, open it up, and they're good to go. Everything sets itself up as long as they have that internet connection.
Awesome, awesome. So let's talk about the life cycle here a little bit, right? Again, traditionally people, IT pros spend a lot of time building and customizing images that are later deployed to devices. Well, Autopilot introduces a totally new approach to this. From the user's perspective, all they have to do is log in with their Azure AD, and then autopilot then basically enables everything that's needed for that user to get up and running. And the nice thing that I really like about this is this is even great for break fixes. So why spend time trying to troubleshoot something when you can bring it back to that business ready state that they were right out of the box when they first opened up the box? So it saves a lot of time on troubleshooting too. Anything else to add here,
Absolutely.
Alex? Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. The one thing I'll just add it upon is the break fix reset scenario that we see here. So not only can you order the devices directly from the vendor, have them delivered to the user, get them up and running immediately, but the break fix reset piece, you actually have two things you can do here where ultimately you're taking support and going to the next level. So if you have, and I know multiple scenarios that I've run into this where either a user profile is corrupted or something like even the OS is corrupted, you can push a full factory reset to the workstation, reinstall the OS, or even better, push an autopilot reset, which wipes out the user profile and then reloads it top to bottom. So you're essentially just wiping out any of those corruption errors, any of the stuff that you might have run into on the support side when it comes down to that.
Oh, that sounds too good to be true. And it even gets better than that, right? Because typically, and you're probably wondering how much is this going to cost me, right? Well, this is included in your M365 or EMS type of licensing. So if you have either one of those, this capability for autopilot is already there for you without any additional cost. Right. So I think now we're going to move over to a demo of Intune and autopilot. So I'm going to stop sharing and turn it over to Alec to share his desktop and kind of take us kind of on tour of Intune and Autopilot, right?
Absolutely. Give me 1 second just to share here and we'll be good to go.
We did have one question in the chat window while we're waiting for that. Is Autopilot supported yet in GCC High? And the answer, unfortunately, is no, not at this time.
It is on the roadmap. It just hasn't happened yet,
Yeah,
unfortunately. Okay, so you should see my Intune console here. I apologize. There's no I apologize. There's no pre-populated data here, but we're going to go through just kind of the management, how this looks, and what you're going to get, the biggest benefits and problem solvers here. So let's just jump right into it. We have our devices section here. As soon as a device is enrolled, you're going to find it here. Now, this could be any of these scenarios. It could be MDM, it could be Windows Modern Management, or even Linux devices. That's the new step that Microsoft is taking. If we go right into devices here, this is where you'd see all your individual devices. You'd be able to access those devices. You'd be able to run those remote wipe scenarios. You'd be able to run the autopilot wipe scenarios just to wipe out the user profile. So quite a bit you could do there. You could also force synchronizations. You can see what's deployed to the device, whether it be applications, configuration profiles, security profiles, all that kind of stuff right from here. So that's all there. We also have our configuration section. So this is very interesting. So this is where you would be taking, let's say if you decide to go from your current on-prem infrastructure directly to cloud, or if you're doing a slow burn migration where you're going with a hybrid and managing it from both sides, you can come right in here, create a profile, and this is essentially your group policy. So for instance, let's go right to Windows 10 and later. We can see here we have two options. So settings catalog, Microsoft tried to make this very easy. What this is essentially you click on settings catalog, you can search for any setting that you can think of, that whether it would be group policy, preferences, that kind of thing, and they would show up here. You could set them and be good to go. We also have our templates. Now, this is where we would set up different things like password policy, certain endpoint protection strategies, pushing down VPN connections, Wi-Fi, even certificate systems can be pushed down through here. We also have our Windows health monitoring, as well as telemetry based on this. All in all, once this is in play, as long as you have your Windows health and telemetry, one of the biggest bonuses is that you can actually see an ongoing analytical report that kind of states what applications are crashing, how often is the system having issues, is it having startup issues? You can even see the startup time, how long it's taking to start up the device. So you're going to start to essentially be able to base your life cycle on the physical hardware itself, and is it having problems? Is it surviving? Is it doing what it needs to do? So that's where we get this. We also have our administrative templates. Now, this is where we're kind of moving directly from the on-prem to the cloud. Exactly how you would set up an admin template group policy within the on-prem, you have that here. You have your computer configurations, your user configurations, and you would go right through. So this has your Windows policies, start menu policies, printers, OneDrive, as well as Office applications to get you up and running and good to go pretty much immediately. So quite a bit you can do there. We can also import ADMX policies. So if you want a nice, easy transition from on-prem to cloud, essentially you would just take that, import those policies directly from the exports of GPO, and you're up and running and good to go within minutes. We also have our compliance policies here. So compliance policies are another security mechanism. So essentially you're now taking one of the biggest issues that you may be running into is, how do I verify a device is up to par to be on our infrastructure and be on our network? Is it secure enough? Does it have everything we want it to have? This is how you would do that right here. Regardless of how those devices are set up, whether they're hybrid joined or if they are enrolled directly to cloud. you would simply have your compliance profile, which would call out things like device health, make sure they have BitLocker, make sure they have secure boot, make sure they have code integrity. No more manual processes for checking these things. It just happens. The device comes up as compliant, or it fails and it comes up as non-compliant. You can wipe that device automatically. You can set up different actions for that going forward. You can also specify different things like the OS version. For instance, you don't want this device to be under, I don't know, 1903 Windows 10. You can completely block that top to bottom. You also have some compliance here as well. If you are doing co-management, you have your configuration compliance. Make sure it's compliant on both sides before it actually gets the chance to enroll, as well as some system security settings such as password policies, encryption, making sure the device has a TPM chip. So you're getting over that hurdle of security that may have been a manual process previously. And I'll just jump out of that quick. So we do have conditional access here. This is exactly what you would have in your Microsoft Azure, so you're probably already used to this. You can set it up so that ultimately you have a policy that says only compliant devices, only devices that are in Microsoft Intune can access your Microsoft tenant. So it solves for that security gap as well. Scripts, this would ultimately be your startup script. So it's a run once script process for PowerShell. So if you have any scripts that you're currently trying to run, if you're having issues running them through your group policy, maybe you're using an RMM solution, those would be uploaded right here and it will run them and verify that they succeed. And you'll have reporting on that as well. Patching solutions. So this also is your Windows updates. A lot of times, one of the big issues with on-prem infrastructure is if you're not running SCCM and you're not running something like a WSUS solution or an RMM solution, you may find it a little difficult to update your devices. So with Microsoft Intune, not only can you set your update rings, which is your usual policy of setting up the deferral periods, how long is an update allowed to sit there before it actually installs? Are you allowing the users to pause updates, that kind of stuff? That's your update rings. But under feature updates, this is where things start to get interesting. So we can now, just like SCCM, just like WSUS, we can now force updates directly to what we want, including a Windows 11 upgrade directly through Microsoft Intune. So if you have an entire fleet of Windows 10 devices, you're still kind of working over that hurdle of getting everybody on Windows 11. Once you make that decision, you can come right in here and force it to Windows 11. And we have something very similar for quality updates as well. This is just your security updates. You're essentially just saying, force the security update now. So if, for instance, you're in a specific regulatory standard and you have a GCC high tenant, this will work on any tenant, but if you have a GCC high tenant and you're in a regulatory standard, you can force the most recent security update on the spot and tell it to do it now as soon as the device is synchronized. We also have a new feature here. So this is not, I don't believe this is available in GCC High as of yet, but it is coming. We now have driver updates. So you can now set up a policy right through here and start to update your hardware drivers. So Dell, I believe Lenovo and HP are on here as well. And you can start to approve specific driver updates for deployment.
Hey, Alec, we got a question about ADMX. The question is when you import ADMX, does that include third-party ADMX templates like Chrome and Firefox?
Yes, it does. So actually, that's a beautiful way of doing this. So previously, there used to be a methodology called, well, it still is there, CSPs. So essentially, you'd have your CSP, you'd have to import a specific path, the actual file itself, and what the text within an ADMX file would be. And it was a little difficult on doing that and actually getting the settings to function. With the ADMX piece of the puzzle, you could now simply take that ADMX file that you downloaded directly from Google, import it. It'll be an empty template, but you can go right in, configure the settings that you want, hit go, and it applies right across the board. So things like your Google Chrome homepage, setting up your history, that kind of stuff, or even just clearing history and cache. No matter what, as soon as you close the browser, you can set up all the settings you have in Google Chrome or any of those third-party solutions.
Awesome. Awesome. I think that answered your question, Randall. If not, feel free to ask a follow-up. We have another question from Tom Turpin about can we do all the things you're showing us without a cloud gateway manager?
So yes and no. So Cloud Gateway Manager is more so on the co-management side. If you're going cloud only and you've made the decision to do that, or you're doing a slow burn migration where you're hybrid joining and then eventually all your new devices going forward are going to be cloud, the cloud side, you don't need any of that.
Excellent. Excellent. Okay. I think that answers the question.
Beautiful.
Let us know if that answers your question, Tom. I'll go ahead and continue. Sorry.
Not a problem. Not a problem. So we have all of that. We went through the Windows updates. We went through kind of group policies. The analytics, this is really where you're going to see, okay, here's all the group policies that I exported from my on-prem Active Directory. Once you actually make that import, not only is it going to create a policy for you, what this is actually going to do is tell you what's supported, what isn't supported. So if there are any specifics around your on-prem Active Directory, for instance, that cannot be managed from Intune, specifically because it refers back to something in the actual Active Directory schema or something like that, this is where it's going to tell you that. It's going to red flag it immediately, and you're going to be able to break that out, run the reports, and once you're happy with it, you can select all the settings you want to import. It imports it into a profile. You hit go, and then you're up and running. No problems whatsoever. Okay. I'm also going to go up to the enrollment section here. So this is where we're going to see you have quite a bit here, but I'm going to focus on the Windows piece just for now. This is where we would configure different things like how do you want your enrollment to take place. So the automatic enrollment basically just says you can set it up for all or even specific subsects of the company, different departments, to allow them to enroll in this system, so you don't have to make that full move immediately. You have your co-management settings, that kind of stuff, as well as, and this is where sometimes things get a little tough, is the platform restrictions. So this is one thing that more than likely you can't do now with an on-prem Active Directory based on whether or not they have credentials to access certain things. This will allow you to completely block BYOD devices, aka personally owned, versus corporate owned devices. And that goes across the board. So essentially, you have somebody walks into the building with a Windows PC, they have credentials to access a share, they try to map a drive. If they're on Active Directory, they might be able to get in and be good to go and access those files on a non-managed machine. Here you can lock that down fully. We also have our Windows Hello for Business. So this is another security gap that we might be able to help you with. So previously, Windows Hello for Business, ultimately, you've required servers and different things on-prem in order to manage this. Windows Hello for Business can now be managed fully from Microsoft Intune. This sets up the policies on the workstations and forces the user to either set up a PIN, biometrics. It depends how deep you want to go into security. And you can also do physical devices as well. So if you have any PIV solutions or that kind of thing, you'd be able to manage those from here as well. We also have our Windows Autopilot section down here. This allows you to not only see the devices that are registered with Autopilot, but also go above and beyond. So with Autopilot, you have your deployment profiles. This is specifically going to set up your out-of-box experience. So like we mentioned, you'd be able to allow users to get a device directly from the vendor, sign in, and have all their information set up. The Autopilot profiles take it to the next level. So not only does it do that, it also sets up the out-of-box experience to pre-configure certain settings like the privacy settings, all the different checkboxes you get when you purchase a new device directly from any of the vendors or even from Microsoft. Any of those checkboxes, you can pre-configure that, tell it to ignore it, and when the user goes to set it up, you could essentially just have them put in their credentials, and then they hit a desktop, and all their apps and everything will be there and ready to go. So pretty simple to manage that. One of the last things I want to go through here is just the enrollment status page. So this is also an interesting piece of the puzzle. So yes, we can manage everything. We can push down applications. We can force configuration profiles, security profiles, all that kind of stuff. The addition to this is that you can also set up the enrollment status page, and this solves for, instead of having an IT person stand in front of the computer, set it up for the user and kind of keep them from doing things they shouldn't do during the setup process, that's exactly what this does. This sets up a page that forces certain requirements. So you can say, make sure all of these apps are installed, make sure all of these security profiles are set up, make sure all these configurations are set up before the user can actually hit the desktop and do anything. So this is your safeguard to say that even if you're doing some sort of a manual process with a legacy application, they don't somehow close up the command prompt or something like that. So you can kind of lock it down. Really quick, I'll also just dive into applications. So applications, this is a pretty tightly set up solution here. Everything has essentially been migrated over. So for one, we have your Microsoft Store apps. Everything that you need from the Microsoft Store, you can immediately select this. You search right through the Microsoft Store. This could be for instance, Adobe Acrobat Reader or anything specific. So even if you wanted to do something like the Power Automate desktop app, you could push that out right through here. No need to mess around with scripting or PowerShell. We also have our Microsoft 365 apps. This will push out your entire Microsoft 365 application package. You don't have to do anything to get that package. You don't have to download it. You don't have to do any scripting, nothing like that. You select the apps that you want, including projects and Visio, and you can push them right through here. If you're on a GCC High tenant, you would have to exclude Teams and package that separately because there's a separate installation for GCC High on the Teams side. But other than that, you have the full application package. You can keep Microsoft Edge fully up to date. Never have to worry about that. You can push out web application links directly to the desktop. All of this without group policies, all of this without anything special scripted. We also have our line of business apps, directly upload MSIs right into the system and you're good to go. And then we have our Windows apps here, which are Win32s. These are your executables. I know quite a bit of IT teams have a ton of executables that need to be run on the workstations. These can be done simply using the Intune Win packaging tool. It's a quick PowerShell tool. You run a couple PowerShell commands. It packages up your source folder, essentially like a zipped archive. And then once you upload it to here, you're able to put in your different command line switches to run certain things silently. But all in all, that's pretty much your app packaging, and you no longer really have to worry about an RMM solution or anything like that. Okay. Lastly, I'm just going to touch on briefly the reporting section here. So this is going to be something that you really don't have through Active Directory. This is what you would more so have through an RMM solution. Keeping up to date on Windows updates, knowing that all your devices are up to date, keeping up to date on whether or not your group policies are applied, your device configurations, your compliance policies. You can pull these reports at any time, export them, and put them in your system. All right, that is really it for the demo, unless we have any specific questions that you'd like to throw at us to jump into separately.
Yeah, so we had a follow-up from the Cloud Gateway question. I understand, obviously, if you're using all cloud, you don't need the cloud gateway. But if your intentions to use co-management state, then is the cloud gateway still needed, the cloud gateway manager?
So I usually say it's recommended for some additional capabilities. If you're looking to use the remote support through SCCM and you're using the co-management, then absolutely yes, you want to have that. If not, it's not 100% necessary, no.
And then there's a GCC High question here about reporting. It sounds like the GCC High folks don't see all the options you're showing, so there might be some stuff that's not available in GCC High for reporting.
Yes, so there are some missing items. So I'm currently on a commercial tenant for this demo. There are some missing items. However, all of them, as far as I know, are on the roadmap to be released in GCC High. It's more than likely just going to take a little bit of time.
Yeah, that's a common answer, isn't it? Unfortunately, but in due time they'll get them, I guess.
No,
All
nobody's
right.
happy about it, but it is happening.
Yeah, I know. And we got a big fan of Windows Hello for Business apparently as well, so that's great to hear. We did see a lot of use of that. All right. Well, any other last minute questions? We can catch some questions up at the next section on questions. Otherwise, we'll go ahead and get started on the next section, which is all about desktop as a service. And what we mean by that is, what Gartner defines as desktop as a service is, it's the provisioning of virtual desktops by a public cloud or service provider, and uses this term for a variety of cloud solutions and describes them in a way that is familiar with customers. So what we're talking about really there is for things that you don't own, like hardware, right? So there's two different options that Microsoft offers, right? There's Azure Virtual Desktop and Windows 365. And these are interesting options to take a look at if you're not using them. I saw in the we had about 13% of respondents choose that they've started doing Azure Virtual Desktop, although I have not seen anybody, unless somebody came in late, using Windows 365 yet, which is interesting. And interesting to know, just so people are aware, that Microsoft actually, as of 2 weeks ago, is in the upper right-hand corner of this for completeness of vision and ability to execute in the quadrant. So they are definitely a leader now, beating out Citrix and VMware. So definitely take a look at Azure Virtual Desktop as well as Windows 365. We're going to talk about each one of those next. So let's get started here on these technologies. Alec, let's talk about Azure Virtual Desktop first.
Absolutely. So Azure Virtual Desktop is really going to solve quite a few problems when it comes to just general IT infrastructure. You have quite a bit here. For instance, we have on the list here off-net secure access. Basically, you can access these systems from anywhere. You can use them completely secured for research enclaves, not be able to access or not have the ability to copy paste data outside of the infrastructure, not be able to move anything out. It literally just becomes a window into your infrastructure. You can do virtual labs. You can also have seasonal workers. You can upscale and downscale these hosts on the fly. No worries about replacing hardware or downsizing or purchasing anything additional on top of that. It would just come down to your compute costs. Same thing with contractors. And then you also have the high graphics intensive resources. So ultimately, if there's any specific department, let's say even the marketing department, that wants to encode video, you can grab an AVD host specifically in a SKU that has a large graphics card and get those NVIDIA CUDA cores running and kick everything into high gear, have that all come out without having to purchase physical workstations to make that all happen. So quite a bit there. This is really just the next stage of a terminal server with some additional advancements that get you to that next level.
Absolutely. And again, the great thing about this, I want to talk about this again, is that through hybrid use rights on your licensing, if you own M365 license SKUs, you already own the Windows OS for the AVD up in the cloud. So you don't have to pay for that additionally Windows OS capabilities up there. You already own that capability for on-prem, so you own it up there in the cloud as well. So that's kind of a nice benefit right there. For secure research enclaves, this is something that we've seen over and over again. It doesn't make sense when somebody wins a grant at a university, possibly, it's a lot of effort to get that grant stood up and running. You got to get all the all the technology in place, right? And so what the first thing you have to do is go through procurement, get the desktops ordered and things like that. Well, that's no longer needed, right? And then what are you going to do with those desktops after the grant is over with, after 2 or 3 years, right? This is a great option for those folks that want to spin things up quickly and then take them back down again, right? This is the customized version of desktop as a service is kind of how I like to look at it, as opposed to the next option, which is Windows 365. Alec, go ahead and let's talk about this for a second.
Absolutely. So Windows 365 is a new offering that's very interesting. So this is more, you can use this for pretty much anything. However, the way I see this is more for on and off employees and different people that need workstations that maybe you don't want to wait for the lead time to purchase a workstation, or you don't want to purchase the hardware and deal with the life cycle. This is a static cost per month per user. They get their own physical workstation that's hosted in the cloud. They can just log right into it, the same as you have with AVD, and they have full access to any of the applications that you push down. And again, it's fully managed by Microsoft Intune, so you can even match your physical workstations with the same image. So applications, policies, security, everything top to bottom, and the user gets access instantly.
Awesome. Well, hopefully we'll start seeing some usage of this over the next year. I know it's a relatively new offering from Microsoft, and it definitely has its use cases. So let's keep an eye out for that. All right. So I think we're almost at the end here. We're going to break again for questions. If there's any questions, please let us know. And while we're waiting for questions, one thing we didn't talk about, but we have seen a lot of customers in this situation where they're using Jamf, right, Alec? And do they need to continue because they have Apple products and they want to continue supporting the Apple products? What have you seen with Jamf and using Intune to replace possibly Jamf?
So Jamf is very interesting. So Jamf is a great product when it comes to needing custom developmental or coding backends into Mac OS and iOS devices. But ultimately, my experience with 99% of clients is that you may have Jamf, you may have purchased Jamf because it did have that capability, but more than likely, you don't really need those advanced features. More than likely, all of the solutions that you're looking for, application deployment, policies, encryption, security, just the general stuff, you can get that all through Microsoft Intune, and the migration process is pretty simple. On top of that, if you are going to manage your devices through Microsoft Endpoint Manager and you do want to keep Jamf, there is also a Jamf integration where you can manage your devices through Microsoft Intune. But ultimately, we would like to eliminate that additional license if you don't need it.
Excellent. Excellent. I know I've seen a couple customers move off of Jamf for that very reason. So take a look at that, see if it meets your needs with parity and so forth. One last question while we're waiting for any additional questions to come in. Can you talk a little bit about the new Intune suite, about what you're seeing as most beneficial and what you've seen possibly have started using yet so far? And what
Absolutely. So there's two huge features that I see here in the new Intune suite. We have remote help. So remote help is going to be your remote screen sharing, your remote control of these workstations for the end users. So essentially, you could really eliminate your RMM solution at this point and say, okay, user calls in for support. You can remote right into their workstation, right through the Intune console, have full access to make any changes you need to make, and you're up and running and good to go. On top of that, we also have endpoint privilege management. So this is another kind of game changer feature that Microsoft has, to be honest, not really been advertising too much, but they have been working on this for quite a while. You could essentially, if you have any applications that require, let's say, admin rights or power user rights in order to run the application, we don't really want to give that end user local admin rights to the workstation. What endpoint privilege management does is it allows you to specifically call out that exe, the executable for that application, and say, elevate the rights to administrator so that they can run that app without needing rights to the workstation, so that they can't make any settings changes, but they could still run that app and have full access to do what they need to do.
Right. I think you can set the time on it, like they have access to do it in one day or something like that, and then it takes that privilege back, right? think that's what I've seen.
Exactly. So you could schedule that as well. Yeah,
Yeah.
you could schedule it as well.
That's pretty cool.
And
All
again,
right.
just real
I
quick, we're
just want to
gonna,
make it,
Go ahead.
sorry, real quick, I was just gonna say we're gonna stop the recording. So if
Okay.
anyone has questions, feel
Thank you.
free to come off of mute and ask those without being recorded. So I'm gonna do that right now.